This is the Beyond the Dojo podcast. I'm Lauren.
I'm Jeremiah.
And it is very difficult to record podcast episodes when you have a baby in your life.
Yeah.
You know what's even weirder is a couple months ago, sometimes when I'm teaching, I have to hold her in the wrap like you saw in the last episode me wearing, because sometimes she just won't go to sleep or gets fussy for other people. And that was the first time I experienced, teaching the advanced class, first time I experienced the feeling of the rumble when she took a giant poop.
Oh, nice.
While I was holding her teaching the advanced class. Yeah, it just brings a whole new dynamic to the class.
Well, we're not candid about anything, are we?
No, I'm not candid at all. Anyway, everyone heard it, so, everyone was brought into our joys of being parents.
Brought to our world.
So,
eat, sleep, and poop.
Pretty much. Sleep, poop, and burp. That's the one we have a checklist of, why she's crying. So, anyway, so we put a little poll on our YouTube channel to see what people wanted us to talk about in this next episode, and the winning topic was burnout. So this has been something we've chatted a little.
Are they calling us burnouts?
They're not calling us burnouts. I listed. It's fine. Okay, they're not calling us names. So we've talked about this a little bit lately. My first thought was, and if you want to talk about this, maybe some as well. Where are some examples that you've seen other instructors getting burnt out? So we'll kind of talk from an instructor perspective and also karateka perspective, but maybe like instructors being burnt out. Have you ever experienced that or seen it?
I personally haven't experienced. Okay, well, I'll talk about it this way. Talking to the guys we know who train and travel internationally and teach internationally, the reoccurring theme is that the travel kills them more than the seminars. It's in the airplane, the sickness and stuff, especially as these guys get older, right?
Right.
They just don't want to travel as much because they have to pay for it a week or two afterwards.
Yeah, like all the recovery.
All the recovery and everything. And that's a real thing, and I don't talk to a lot of international instructors. I speak to two of them, right?
Right.
3 on occasion. And they all have said the same thing. It's the airplane ride, the normal sickness that comes with it. One even talked about the radiation, like how much radiation your body gets while you're flying. I mean, it's not a lot per flight, but then
I didn't know
you're
that.
exposed to it. And if you're exposed to it on a regular basis, it's a whole different issue.
Okay,
so
I did not know that.
Physically, I think the burnout comes from your body constantly fighting illness and constantly fighting stuff.
And planes are cesspools.
Yeah, planes are horrible, right?
Yeah.
So, but on a normal level, like you and I could experience, I found out that I get burnt out when the students kind of feel burnt out in a sense, like when they lose their motivation to work or try or give me effort. I kind of lose my motivation to teach because it's like, why am I teaching? These people don't want to be here.
Right.
So that's what I normally feel when I get like a tinge of burnout, is that whole like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Is there any real reason why to do it? Because no one's really, listening or trying.
Well, I think too, like when you are teaching like as a guest instructor, it's really exciting. Or if you're a student who gets the chance to teach, for me it was really exciting because you get the opportunity to share stuff that you've been thinking about. But when you're teaching all the time, it can get like it can become a lot and it can become a burden. Like my instructor, he ran our dojo for like over 30 years, and even when I first started training, which was like 14 years before he retired, he was already burnt out. Like it would show in the way the classes would run or wouldn't run, and he would have other instructors teach because he just, he wanted to do other things. And I think in his case, and this happens with other instructors too, I think, but he got to the point where it was like, you want to have the dojo running, but there's not really anybody else to teach, but you don't want to let it go, but you are just so burnt out, you don't want to spend the time, to devote to structuring your classes. So, I've seen that on like not a massive, not on a famous sensei level. In his case, it was just kind of a local guy, but that I think that becomes very common also, is that some of the instructors that we had just, they kind of started going through the motions.
Right. I think honestly, I mentioned the international instructors just because I want to give them some recognition of like they do get burnt out. Right?
Oh yeah.
They're on stage when the time they arrive to the site where they're teaching to the time they leave. They're working, right? They're constantly moving and going, and it's funny. I've never heard any of those guys talk about that aspect. It's always the travel that they can kind of complain about. On a local level, I think it's more important to address the issue because I think it's more prevalent.
Burnout
Burnout because
teaching.
Yeah, what I've noticed lately is this. I'm a great teacher for hand, knee down, hand, shoulder on, and hand, knee down. I could teach that kata left, right, upside down. It is the katas I could teach because those are the two katas we teach all the time, and if you have a high turnover rate without a lot of retention, that's all you're doing. It's teaching people how to make a fist and basic blocks and everything else. And
it's almost mind-numbing.
It is It is. No, it's not almost. It is mind-numbing.
It is mind-numbing.
It's mind-numbing to the point where you kind of question if you even like karate. Because it becomes that thing.
And we've talked to high-level instructors who have said, like, you get tired of teaching hand shot on over and over again. And I think that kind of depends. Like, I've thought about from like a teaching perspective, people like teachers who teach in public school, teaching the same exact subject every single class, like however many periods in a row. So 5, 6, 7 periods in a row, teaching the same class that many times a day, and then doing it again tomorrow, a different class subject, but you're doing it that many different times. Yeah. And like I feel like there's two ways you can look at it. It can be like, oh my god, this is so boring because I'm like on an assembly line doing the same thing over and over again, or you could also use it as practice to get better, I guess, to be more
refine your craft.
Precise, and to see like, can I, with this next group of students, the next time I teach this, can I do a better job at relaying concepts to this new group? And it can't be cookie cutter because everybody learns differently. So, am I improving as an instructor? Am I cueing in on what they're, how the way that the student learns? Am I conveying this idea more technically correct?
That's a great point because when I start to feel burnout, when I was feeling burnt out in the Ocala Dojo, right towards the end there, it was a burden. Right. What I realized was that I was so focused on the material I was teaching and not the people I was teaching to. And the moment I started to focus on my students and how they learned and what made sense to them, teaching the same material over and over again became not as bad. Right? It wasn't such a burden because I taught, hand shot on 10 times. It was like, okay, well, this class, this individual had a hard time doing this. What can I do better to make it make sense to them? Right? How many different ways can I say this until it makes sense? Right. So my focus slightly changed. Right. And it became easier. Like I haven't really felt burnt out teaching. Right. In years. Yeah. And our teaching load's been heavier now.
Well, no, I'll just call you out on this just a little bit. You did mention recently there was a class you're like, hey, I need a break from teaching this particular class. Yes. And I think sometimes I don't know if that's necessarily burnout, but like you feel like
it's a difference between knowing you're about to choke somebody.
That could be that.
And knowing you're burnt out.
Right.
I wasn't burnt out with that situation. What I was tired of was the consistent like lack of effort. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. It's not a matter of ability because every one of those students we're talking about, they have ability. Mm-hmm. They just don't want to do it. Right. And that kind of got to me.
Yeah, and okay, so that we'll get into like the student burnout or the
student aspect we'll talk about later. But
I feel like those two really play a lot into it because if the student is like, some students are just lame and they're not gonna try, they just don't care, they're at a point, especially intermediate level, they're just like, I don't want to try anymore. Or sometimes they've heard the same thing in the same way so many times that it just doesn't register anymore. Sometimes you need a change of pace. You need to change the structure of the class. In this case, we changed who was instructing. So I started teaching it instead of you. So sometimes that does help as far as the student. But I can see the perspective where high level instructors are like, I don't want to teach basic stuff anymore. I've taught a lot of that. I only want to teach high level stuff. I can see that. I'm not enough years into this for it to be,
Yeah,
I guess
I think there's a very few people that have that privilege.
Yes. Well, this is true. And
That's
you also have to be pretty good, I think, to have that privilege.
Yeah, you have to be an international level kind of teacher. Mm-hmm. Your karate has to be really good to do that.
Yeah.
And there's few and far between.
Right.
Right.
I mean, I think ideally, if we were to look at what tends to happen with instructors where, we are trying to continue to improve our own karate and our understanding, and if we want to be able to eventually teach people who are where we are now, we obviously have to continue to improve. In an ideal situation, we would hopefully be able to bring up other karateka behind us in our own dojo who would be willing to take that role of teaching more of the beginners, where we are able to teach some of the more advanced students. But that, I think, would take very deliberate systems and stuff as far as the structure of the dojo, all that kind of stuff. That gets a little bit more involved. But I think dojo structure also helps with limiting burnout, because we have a great group of black belts who are always like, hey, if you need us, let us know. We'll step in. We'll teach. Kind of referring back to the experience I had growing up, our teacher would get so burnt out that he would just kind of shove classes off on other people for a long period of time, and then they would get burnt out. And I never want that to happen. And I think you kind of came from a similar background where you were trying to run a dojo with somebody else and they were shoving everything off on you and they weren't taking their responsibility. So I feel like there's a big responsibility issue there, but also it causes people to get burnt out whenever you're not giving them a choice as to whether or not they can teach, and it's not their business.
Yeah, so in Ocala, the other dojo we had, I was the only one teaching.
Right.
All the classes, every time we had class. Mm-hmm. And it was nice because it got me to a point where I was constantly thinking karate and working on my karate, and I loved it. Right. But then again, after so many years of that, you're like, okay, I'm about had enough of it. Yeah.
But sometimes we're hesitant to ask people to help this reason.
Exactly. Because I was about to say that. It's like you have to be careful. Like, you have a community that was willing to help. Mm-hmm. You have to, as a head instructor or dojo owner, you have to manage that community and not take advantage of it. Right. Because you want those guys to stick around and enjoy karate and be part of the dojo, but you don't want, you want to have that opportunity to use them. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you kind of get lazy and just like take advantage of things.
So we went through this study. It's actually on our shelf over here, Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend, and they essentially just talk about like there's like a part of it where they talk about like not overextending oneself, and we talked about this. We did this with our church, and we talked about volunteers. And whenever you have people who are filling in, for the most part in dojos, they're usually not paid employees, which would be great if we were that big. But for the most part, these guys stepping in to help volunteer, they're volunteers.
For the most part, dojos like ours, mm-hmm. which are small to medium, mm-hmm. Where you can't afford a full paid staff. Right. Because there are dojos out there that can afford paid staff and that would be the way to go. I would never, you mentioned, possibly grooming as students to kind of teach. Grooming. I don't. Well, it's
growing.
It's the correct term for the situation.
Okay.
Jesus, I mean, because that is what you're doing.
Okay.
Right. Yes. I think it's a horrible option, because in the very last moment they decide they don't want to, they could just walk away. Right. And now you're stuck with like. Yeah, you're back to square one. And
I can see that both ways.
I can see it both ways.
I can see where like there's an advantage of teaching students in a way that you would like to see, your dojo to continue to go.
Absolutely.
But then obviously if you spend all that time and then they don't end up wanting to commit to that kind of a lifestyle, then I get it. But we have had the experience in the past of we had this awesome group of volunteers whenever we opened our current dojo. They actually were kind of helping run the previous dojo whenever I was managing it for my old sensei, and we did not draw boundaries as far as their volunteering, and they got so burnt out, and they were just like a hair's breadth from Shodan. I mean, we were like turning the corner for them to be able to test, and they were like
done.
yeah, they were done. And I don't blame them. And I got to take some responsibility for that. But, preventing burnout in your volunteers is important as well. I think,
Absolutely.
You're trying to stop yourself from being burnt out, but then you don't want to take advantage of other people in order to prevent that as a teacher. Right. So I'm just, throwing that out there as a warning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we learn the hard way, that's for sure.
Yeah. It's crazy how much, as a dojo owner, how much of a therapist you have to be. Like, you have to be able to read the community pretty well to understand, like, the vibe of people and what's going on.
And always have, like, that back door, like,
hey,
if you're willing to help, great. If you don't want to, or you can't volunteer today, or you need a break, not a big deal. Like, always, providing that way out. We've taken on the role, like, we are choosing this as a career. So that's one thing I have to remind myself sometimes is, like, we don't get paid a lot to do this, but we do. This is part of what we do with our business. And, if this is what we get to do every week and we make a little bit of money doing it, then I think we're doing pretty well, even if it does get a little bit repetitive. We could be sitting in an office somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
So, that's another encouraging thought.
Yeah. So what I would encourage teachers to do to kind of avoid burnout, right, is network. Network with other dojos, right? And maybe on occasion invite some local other teacher to come into your dojo. If you need a night off, get someone else to come help you, right? Network so you can do the same for them. Secondly, don't be afraid to have fun nights.
Right.
Don't be afraid to, like, we do the Hollywood Fight Night thing for Halloween, right? That literally is like a 2-week period of our class schedule where we as teachers can sit back and watch these kids make fools of themselves over and over again.
Fight scenes.
Right? And it's cool. It's a good relaxing atmosphere. And then thirdly is be in contact with your teacher, or with your parents and the people or the community that's connected to the dojo that's not on the floor. Be in constant contact with them. Talk with them a lot, because what is amazing about that is sometimes they will say things to you that is so motivating, so encouraging, but doesn't really mean a lot outside of that, right? And you need to hear that.
Right.
So be constantly in contact with these people and create these relationships so they understand what's going on, And if they see you in a bad place, they can say, hey, you all right?
Yeah.
We have plenty of parents. I wear my emotions on my face. They know when I'm not going to have it, and they will pull me aside. Hey, man, you okay? And I need that, right? And sometimes I'm like, it's a crap day, but we got to do it, and we're going to grind through it, and they're okay with that. So that's the things I would encourage teachers to do to kind of help navigate burnout.
Yeah.
You can never avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be some bits of it here and there. I would say, like, on a micro level, one thing that's helped me is because I'm so, like, what's wrong with you? Why isn't this getting through your head? Like, do this exact thing today. Because sometimes students just can't learn physically how to do the specific technique that you're asking in the way that you're asking that particular day. And I used to be really bad about this with especially young kids. Like, we'd do it over and over and over again until they would get it. Well, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes they're going through developmental stages, especially if they're younger kids. So they're not going to always have the motor control that you're expecting them to.
Right.
So what I have learned is if we can consistently rep something out, even if the class doesn't look identical day after day, as long as I'm consistent and I'm always, like, reminding them, like, okay, try it this way. Sometimes it takes a long time, but I do see improvements in the students. And this is particularly, like, I know not everyone teaches kids as young as 4 and 5, but 4 and 5-year-olds class, I have a very basic structure that we follow every class. We do it the same way every class. We have the same warm-up. We stop at around the same time. They have a water break. They have a quick minute to run around, and then we get started with class. And the way that class goes is we go back and forth between doing either some kind of kihon and then some kind of, like, obstacle course, or we'll do kata and some kind of obstacle course depending on the day. And usually it's atrocious when it starts, but we do that same class, the same obstacle course twice that week. So by the second time they do it, they're getting better at that, so that helps. And then we do the same kihon pretty much every week, and then we build on what we can. Okay. And even though I'm not taking tons of time to explain the technicalities of it, I'm physically doing it with them. I'll give them one correction here or there, and after repeating it over and over again, because I'm being consistent and giving them corrections and layering, they do start to see improvement. So that's just something I've noticed in that age group, and I feel like some of the other groups, that consistency has helped as well, as long as, there's an element of fun to it. So that to me has helped with the burnout a little bit, even though that does make it more repetitive. Being able to see that there is improvement, and that even though it's not happening right away, as long as I'm keeping my eyes open, there's something there. So that's just been lately kind of what I've been focused on. I
think you glossed over an amazing point, and that is understanding your students' developmental stage. Right? You can't expect a 4-year-old, 5-year-old to have great coordination, right?
No.
But then again, you would expect can have expectations of a 12-year-old to have better coordination.
Right.
They're not going to be elite athletes, but at the same time, there is this understanding of what a 12-year-old can do compared to what a 4-year-old can do.
Right.
Knowing those differences is, to me, also helped.
And then even with like teens and adults who are most of the way developed, like granted, teens and into early adulthood, they continue to see improvements in their muscular coordination, stuff like that as well. But that one's also going to be repetition and just consistency with the material. So I haven't been able to be as active in that class recently to kind of layer it to try that concept. But that's what I've been doing in the 4 and 5-year-olds and the intermediates class. Yeah. So, anyway, just thinking about that from a teaching perspective. Well, Jeremiah's his own chiropractor.
Ooh. Sorry.
So let's think about it now from the perspective of the student or the karateka.
Well, let's start with the baseline, right? The baseline is the honeymoon period is always generally beginner's karate, right? Sure. That's when everybody's excited. It's new. It's unique. Intermediate level is generally when everybody kind of burns out because it's such repetitive work and such a grind that it's hard to see the improvement.
And I feel like it's kind of abrupt, and I don't know how to fix that, like in our teaching, but it just happens that way. Like it just gets harder, like almost out of nowhere.
Well, yeah, of course, because the way we teach is that beginner level, you're a little bit more welcoming and understanding to mistakes and difficulties and everything else.
Even though it's standards.
Right. But by intermediate, there's a certain standard met to be an intermediate karate player. And now the expectations are there. You know what I'm saying? So with the expectations, there is more of a, in my opinion, more of a demand to perform.
Yeah.
There is no like, oh, you can do it whenever you want to, or you can take that. It's got to be consistent.
Yeah.
And I think consistency brings that burnout. Doing it over again. So
yeah, and the way it was explained to me is that whenever you're first starting out in karate, the improvements that you make, they're bigger and bigger. Well, the movements are bigger and bigger.
Right.
Or well, not bigger and bigger, but they're larger because you're learning the scale and the actual technique versus as you are going through intermediate level and onto advanced level, everything is you're refining more minute details, and that jump from like all the way through like 8th Q and maybe 7th Q, where you're learning techniques, and then now all of a sudden you're refining those techniques. I mean, maybe that's where that transitioning has happened. Is the shift. Yeah, and it's not like we don't refine technique a little bit whenever they're white belts and yellow belts and stuff, or 10, 9, 8, 7 Q. It's not that we're not refining technique then, but you're spending so much time just getting the motor pattern down.
Right.
That once they've got that down, now we're trying to refine that pattern, considering they have it. But that becomes very difficult for a student. And once again, going back to the teaching perspective, we just try to make it as fun as we can. From a student's perspective, if you're an intermediate,
it is what it is.
It's hard as a student to make it more fun for yourself.
Right. Well, I think we do a good job of kind of establishing what we're doing and what phase of karate they're in.
Yeah.
We're very open about, hey, this is a grind. This is not going to be easy. It's going to be boring. This is part of it.
Right. I remember being that level, and like all I wanted to do was we're like playing Legend of Zelda and stuff at home on the Nintendo 64 or the GameCube or whatever we were playing at the time. And it'd be time for karate, and I would just like, I don't want to go. Because I was at that level. It was just like, it was just boring. And like by 6Q, 8 or 6Q, 5Q, it's just like, I don't really want to be there. So that was very difficult. And I feel like, I think I just put my head down, and I was just my mom was always like, oh, you don't want to go. Do you want to quit? And I'm like, no, I don't want to quit. And I feel like that egged me on more than anything else, just because I'm such a contrarian, unfortunately. So, for me, it was just putting my head down at that point. Do you remember whenever you were that rank? Like, was it difficult? Did you go through that same thing at intermediate level?
No, because, so in my case, being the gaijin, being the foreigner, being the mixed half Japanese kid, right? They always said, oh, you're not going to be good enough. Mm-hmm. You're not going to do well.
So it was always motivating for you then?
Yeah, for me, it was like, kiss my ass, I'm going to beat you. Mm-hmm. And that's how I motivated myself. So, when I saw kids slacking, I worked harder. Mm-hmm. I wanted to show them that what they thought was subpar, it was better than they could ever have their kids do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, then that would be motivating. So,
yeah.
If you're in an environment like that, there's some motivation.
So, the environment I grew up as a child in karate, there was you didn't have the option to be burnt out. Mm-hmm. And in Japanese culture, that's no option there. Mm-hmm. That's why there's such a high suicide rate in young,
right? Because there's so much
Japanese teens and college and high school level kids, is because there's so much expectation. Right. And you've been doing it all your life. Mm-hmm. It gets to a point where that's all you know,
right, and
all you experience, and it's not kind of worth it. So I get that too. That being said,
so about like advanced level. So whenever you were, I say advanced. So we were just talking intermediate level is like 6th, 5th, 4th Q. Yeah. So now talking about like 3rd Q in our dojo, that's brown belt level. So 3rd Q, 2nd Q, 1st Q kind of range. Yeah. You're like heading up to Shodan. Do you recall, like, did you have any kind of feelings of burnout at that point?
No.
You didn't?
No. I was so much more hungry.
Yeah, and I don't think I did either. I think what helped was having other people to train with. And I was pretty young. Well, you were too. We had a group of us that would train together, and that really helped also, being surrounded by people who were training.
Yeah, it was me and one other kid that we all, I think there was about 10 of us that started on the same month, in a sense. Mm-hmm. And only 2 of us got to black belt. Mm. Gotcha. The rest of them just dropped. Yeah. They were dropping like flies, intermediate level. Yeah. But, it was he and I, so. Yeah. And that's nice. To have a kohai or someone that's trained with you the whole time, even if you don't, like, really relate. Yeah. It's nice to know that dude there knows exactly how you feel, right?
Yeah. Somebody else is,
experiencing the pain.
Yeah. And, I mean, and Shodan is close, hopefully. so there's some motivation there. So after Shodan can be really tough. Lots of people quit after Shodan. Like, they feel they got to that point, and people I don't know. I'm not sure if people really feel like they've arrived, or if they are just like, I'm so tired of training my butt off that I just need a break, and then they don't come back. I'm not 100% sure what that is, because pretty much everybody quit out of my group after Shodan. I was the only one left.
I don't know who out of my group.
Yeah.
I don't know if that kid continued. Generally, in Japan, you get your Shodan young. Uh-huh. You basically will go through high school in karate. That's like your sport.
And then so you quit whenever you get college level.
Well, a lot of them do, right? Yeah. A lot of them.
Oh, that happens in the States as well, though. I mean, if you start pretty young and then you get, your Shodan by the time you're in high school, usually
karate,
drop off.
kendo, judo, sumo, all those kind of sports in Japan is kind of like baseball, basketball, football in the States. Mm-hmm. You get scholarships to colleges. You get you get manicure.
Jeremiah's talking about grooming.
Oh, Jesus. It's a great word to describe what I'm talking about, though. Yeah. You're basically lined up to what college you're going to go to, what team you're going to, compete for.
How dope would it be in the U.S. if we could get karate scholarships? Like, seriously?
Like real scholarships.
I know.
And that's been their nature. So for most high school karateka, for them not to continue training is very common. you're no different than the high school football star, right? That didn't continue.
Right. Yeah. So it's just normal to
It's
stop.
normal to them.
Yeah.
But I will say this: in Japan, there's a resurgence, just like in the States, where after your 20s, late 20s or 30s, people start to come back. Yeah. They'll start to train again.
Yeah.
And then some stick around for a while, some just don't. It's one of those things.
So when I was a Shodan, I guess what motivated me, I did genuinely enjoy training, and I was about 5 years into it at that point, and I was still young. So I think because I had just been doing it, it did make it easier to keep going. And I also, I had a teacher at the time, my mentor, who, he just kept teaching me new stuff. There was more stuff to learn. I knew there was more to learn. I didn't think that I had made it, completely. And I mean, he was making me aware enough of my own, faults and my own issues, not to make this negative, but I was aware enough of bad technique when I had it that even on my Shodan exam there were things that I noticed about my own movement. I was like, oh crap, I messed that up. Oh, I messed this up. And to me that's motivating. If I have something to fix, I don't know, for some reason to me that's actually a motivating thing, and some people don't like that, but I think that's a big part of the whole karate journey is self-improvement. And
so Shodan burnout to me is, so as a child, I got my Shodan at 12. I just thought the world was going to change when I got my black belt. Yeah. It was going to be a whole different thing, right? Yeah. And there was a letdown because it was the same shit.
Yeah.
It was the same stuff every day, even in karate, even in your practice, right? It was still the same stuff. You still did the same things. And it kind of pissed me off for a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
It's what's there different? And for me, when I experienced that, I shifted my focus completely on competition, and then it became fun. Right? I was able to shift my focus, and I think that's maybe one thing that we want to encourage karateka that are more Yodansha level, black belt level, is when you start to get burnt out, or you feel that drag, do something different. Maybe it could be as simple as do a different kata, or focus on something different in your karate, or heaven forbid, you cross train.
You can do that.
And cross train to another art.
Yeah.
What I've noticed most people tell me about cross training is it accentuates what they've already doing in karate.
Yeah.
And it kind of reaffirms what they're doing and motivates them back again.
Yeah.
Right? So cross training has two options. Either the person just leaves karate and does the other art, or it reinforces what they're doing.
Right.
Right? And I think the positive aspect of cross training is that aspect. You can see it in a lot of teachers. All the high level teachers I talk to, they all cross trained in several other arts. Now, did they take it as serious training? I don't think they took it the same way as karate, where they wanted to achieve rank or whatever. They just had it. It was a part of their practice.
So to be clear, we're not talking about. Seriously, the camera just died. So we're not talking about. I know this is very disappointing. I even charged it, you guys. I'm sorry. We're not talking about MMA.
Podcast burnout.
I know, podcast burnout. We're not talking about MMA.
Camera burnout.
Yes, camera. It's probably hot. We're not talking about MMA. We're talking about having a thorough understanding of Shotokan karate, and then layering other arts on top of it.
And in the perspective of a traditional martial artist, right? For example, Rick Houghton, he did Aikido after he was doing karate for 30 years, right? And that Aikido training had changed his perspective on his own karate. So to me, that's ideally what you kind of want in a cross-training situation, where it accentuates your own karate, and it puts something a different flavor to it, right? A slight different flavor.
I think the other thing is you go from, we're experiencing this with one of our, we have 3 Shodans that we've passed since we opened our dojo, and one of them, he is on the autistic spectrum, and so he's, I don't know if all kids are like this who are autistic, but he wants a goal, and so to not have a goal of an exam can be a little bit of a mental
Yeah,
block
a
because
roadblock,
you don't
yeah.
really have anything to look forward to. So if you don't have something concrete to work toward, then that I think can also be a problem. So if you're able to be like, okay, well, I'm setting this goal for myself, or like Jeremiah said, I'm going to go and compete in this tournament, so that's a goal that I have, or I'm going to learn this kata before whatever, or what was the other thing I was thinking of? Oh, going to seminars also can help. So like getting physically ready to go and compete in a seminar. Just sometimes having those little either events or goals or just little blips on the radar, sometimes that can be enough of a motivator to keep you going as well.
You don't compete at seminars, though.
Compete at tournaments and go to seminars to participate. I know, but sometimes people ready themselves for seminars. They're like, I'm out of shape. I need to get ready. Yeah.
No, I completely get it. I would train to be ready for a Noogle seminar. Mm-hmm. Like, make sure 2 months out that I'm already focused on ideas that were taught before that I had to cement those in a little bit better.
So what do you do now to prevent burnout?
So what I've been doing recently is, and I've done it for years now, I can't say recently, is when I do my own training, so if I'm personal training and everything, I will incorporate weightlifting, any kind of calisthenics, movement. It could be something as goofy as like something I saw on YouTube, right? That just kind of strikes me as interesting, and that's something I'll look into. I'm also very curious in my training. That keeps me from being burnt out. So I have no problem trying to do some stupid technique that I know I can't do any other time, but I'll spend a good couple hours on a weekend and try to figure it out, and then I'm accepting if I don't. So there's that. But there's things you could do outside of personal training. Constantly going to seminars or training with other dojos is always motivating. Having input from different teachers is, as long as it's positive and encouraging, that could be a motivating factor. And then thirdly is
Jeremiah, keep talking. I gotta put the camera on the thing.
Right. The third thing for me is this: as a teacher, what motivates me most to get out of bed and go train is this, and especially with now my daughter being born, is I want to be a physical example to my students of what I'm talking about. And that has motivated me more than anything else, because in my mind, I don't ever want my child to look at me and go, he doesn't know what he's doing. That's not what he's doing.
Hypocrite.
He's a hypocrite.
Yeah.
Right? He's going to sit there and be fat and tell me to go work out. Well, I'm just being honest, though.
Yeah.
Right? It's that to me. And that aspect or that possibility that my child could look at me that way has motivated me more than anything else. I am an external motivated person. Like, I'm goal oriented. I'm externally motivated. If it were for me just be like, oh, I got to work out to get better or work out to be in better shape, I might not go about it as seriously. I'll still attack it, but it would be like, okay.
Yeah.
But with my daughter, with just the thought of my daughter judging me that way and thinking I could be a hypocrite, I like every day, determined every day.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's changed the structure of my life in a sense that it's started to incorporate like healthy habits easier.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Yeah, I think a few things like we've talked about, and we'll continue to talk about, like there are advantages to having someone that you're accountable to. I am a coach of sorts for a living in multiple ways because we teach karate, but then I also am a personal trainer, so I have clients who kind of report to me or who I coach through stuff. But then also for me to have someone who's coaching me in lots of different regards has always been helpful. So we have, our sensei who we communicate with fairly regularly and get critiques on what we're doing. And even though I could probably do that myself, having the accountability is where it comes from. And everyone that I talk to who has a coach, that's what pretty much they all say. I could do this myself, but knowing that I have someone to report to is what makes all the difference in the world. So that's another thing. If you're a person who, that's kind of an external motivation as well. Like, even though I do want to continue to get better, knowing that I have a watchful eye has been a big motivator. And then also, like, we are very blessed that we have a group of black belts, not only within our own dojo that we can train with, but we also have people who travel in once a month from different parts of the state and come and train with us. And we share ideas and whatever, and sometimes we're like, oh yeah, we're all on the same page, and sometimes it's like, no, none of us are thinking the same way at all. But it's okay, because it's fun to interact with other people as well. I'm not always social. Right? Yeah, I'm not always social, but it is kind of fun to have those kinds of discussions. So, surrounding yourself with other people who are training is very helpful. I think there are lots of things I can do by myself, and for some reason, karate is the one thing that for me is very difficult to do on my own. I've always done it in a class setting, so I still haven't made that jump to be able to do as much self-training on my own. I can do self-training with other people around, but for some reason, I have a hard time doing it on my own. Like, it's almost like it's kind of boring almost to me. It's just terrible to say that. I still do it, but I have to find the environment that works for me. So for me, it works to be around other people.
Yeah. Here's a question. Mm-hmm. What is the number one burnout eliminating factor for you? Like, what's the thing that is like your go-to to keep from being burnt out? Because I got one, and I don't think it'd be
to stop me from being burnt out in karate in general.
Yeah, in karate in general, like karate, the karateka lifestyle.
The lifestyle,
like
or
the life, like training, teaching, traveling, all that. Like, what is that thing? What's the one thing that keeps you from being burnt out?
There's so much to learn that being able to sometimes switch gears and look at things from a different aspect of karate can help. So, like, I enjoy constantly getting technical feedback. I really like that. I like being, and sometimes I'll look at a video of myself and I'm just like, wow, I look like shit. And sometimes, believe it or not, that's actually motivating, because I know that there are things that I can continue to work on. So sometimes that's the motivating thing. Sometimes taking a step back. Like, I had a conversation the other day with somebody on Instagram, because I had shared, there's this great other Instagram channel where they talk about self-defense stuff, and he was talking about, like, World Star Hip Hop, where they're, like, grabbing hair and fighting and stuff. And I was telling the guy what you said, that you'll watch World Star Hip Hop videos to see how these people fight, and sometimes you can learn people's tendencies from how they fight. So sometimes just weird things like that, like just looking at, like, the more application-based, or the more self-defense-based, or the more technical stuff, or the more performance, just taking a break and kind of switching aspects, to me, can make it more fun. I don't know that all martial arts have as many aspects as Shotokan does. Maybe they do, but we have Kata, Kihon, Kumite. But then we also have a more self-defense or application-based look at karate. We also have a more tournament-style performance look at karate. So I feel like there's so many other aspects to learn. That's just what keeps me motivated. Is it's just there's just more there that I can still learn. So
for me, it's the atmosphere.
Yeah.
The training atmosphere, the coaching, teaching atmosphere. It's the temperature of the room while you're training has the most effect on my burnout. So for example, if we're just marching up and down the floor and just mindlessly doing karate, I'm checking out. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. If we're going up and down the floor, but we're doing challenging things that I'm not used to doing, something outside the box, or even just difficult, like physically difficult, I'm in. Yeah. Right? If I could train hard next to somebody and punch them and kick them, and they do the same to me with this intensity, and then literally 2 seconds later say mama jokes and laugh at each other, and it'd be cool, that motivates me. Yeah. Like, that atmosphere of being like, I know I'm weird. I go hang out with my buddies, and all we do is punch and kick at each other. But we're good about it. Right? That really is the motivating factor for me in fighting burnout. It's like knowing that I got this time in the day where I could just go at it.
Right.
Be cool.
Yeah.
Be part of Cheers, Cheers, that show on TV is the thing I always try to paint to the teens and adults classes. Like, this is like Cheers. Everybody knows your name. Everybody kind of understands you got some problems. Mm-hmm. We're all here to make each other laugh and enjoy, but we're also on a goal.
Right.
And our goal is to get better at karate.
Right.
And to me, that atmosphere, that Cheers atmosphere, is ultimate goal for my dojo.
Awesome.
Yeah. I want everybody to kind of hang out and be like, this is good.
Yeah.
That's the kind of dojo. It's kind of weird. In Japan, I talk about how strict things were and how like militant they were. Mm-hmm. But I rarely mention the fact that, dude, that booster club, that parent booster club that we had, they always made it so welcoming and comfortable when you were traveling or you had special training. They any one of those women would mother you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that, and then look at Rick's dojo.
They would groom you.
Shut up.
That's messing with you. Anyway, Rick's dojo.
Groom these nuts. That's what you can do. And then, moving down to Florida and training here, and then actually having the opportunity to train with Rick, and seeing how he basically, that's what it was when I first started training with him. Was like a Cheers atmosphere. I'm gonna put him out a little bit. Mm-hmm. We would train, and the dojo rule was you cannot bring American beer to the dojo for the post-training.
This is Rick Cotton's dojo.
Rick Cotton's dojo. So we would train in Longwood Ranch, right? Lakewood Ranch, right? Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, there was like this little cubby side room off of the main little training area. It literally had a refrigerator, a coffee table, and chairs, and all the guys that were there would grab a beer, sit down, and we would talk about anything and everything.
Yes.
And yeah, I want my dojo to be like that. That's pretty cool.
Having other people to train with is very, very helpful. I mean, that's a huge part of preventing burnout. Even if you're not, focusing on the same things that we're focusing on, per se. If you like just going up and down the floor, it can be very helpful to have people to train with. There are guys around here that in our area that don't have anywhere to train regularly, and that's one of the reasons why we offer up our dojo once a month, is for people to come in and train if they're able. But having the chance to train with other people can be very motivating.
Absolutely. Being part of a community. Mm-hmm. Having the right attitude, right atmosphere.
Yeah.
By that, I don't, like Lauren just established, it's not all cookie cutter. We're not all the same. Right. All the same creates burnout. Mm-hmm. There has to be a variety of people and aspects and approaches. Yeah. But that takes maturity. Yeah. It takes maturity on your half and on other people's half to be willing to say, you know what, I disagree with you, but I'm okay with this. We'll do it. You know, willing to try things. Mm-hmm. Honestly, try what we're saying. Yeah. And then move on with it. Sometimes you will. Most people will, and sometimes people won't. That's all right. Yeah. I don't know, but it's been a while since burnout set in. Mm-hmm. So pretty happy with that.
Cool. So what you working
on? So I've kind of changed my focus lately. I feel like I've got into a little bit more like resistance training. So I've been doing a lot of like ankle and wrist weights training. Okay. I've been doing a lot of kata. Last week I did. So the last time we trained in our monthly training, we did Kanku Dai, and I was the only one that said I hate that kata, right? So, being on the kick that I am, and not wanting to be a hypocrite to my daughter, I did Kanku Dai 4 times every day. Nice. Like a week and a half now. Nice. I still hate that kata. Awesome. I absolutely hate that kata.
We gotta go fast because the kid's crying.
Oh, so that's what I'm working on. Okay. What you working on?
You want to go get her?
No.
Okay. So, I think I have sprained my toe or hurt it in some way. Of course, I hit 30, had a kid, and anyway, everything's falling apart. But I was working on Onsu, and I was working on that 5-step punching drill.
5 punch, 1 step.
I mean, 5, whatever. See, pregnancy, post-pregnancy.
Yeah, that's how hard she's
mom brain. Yeah, well, I haven't been able to because of my toe. Okay, well, anyway, you'd be surprised what all you can't do when you jack your toe up. But it's a 5 punch, 1 step drill. Oh my god, I don't even know what to call it. It's originally from the WTKO syllabus, and I think the HDKI syllabus. I think the HDKI syllabus has it also. Anyway, whenever I'm working on it again, I'll report back to you all. I'm not burnt out. I just have a jacked up toe. Okay, this has been great.
You guys are the accountability partner that she needs.
That we need.
She needs.
Okay.
So if you have a comment about her training, make it on the
I'm just going to cut
page.
this off before we even say bye.
Bye.
Bye.